Cameron prepared this dinner with a meticulousness that was almost obsessive, down to every detail. On the long mahogany table, white roses were arranged into a neat pyramid-like tower, like a declaration of class. Candles flickered, their light soft as honey. Crystal glasses gleamed beneath a baccarat chandelier that the girl herself had bought on her trip to Paris last summer. And me? I was standing in front of the mirror in the master bedroom on the second floor of this River Oaks mansion, the house for which I had paid $2 million up front for Cameron. I wore a navy blue cocktail dress, fitted, elegant, understated. On my lapel, I pinned a classic silver brooch, the piece my mother passed down to me on the day she died in New Orleans 15 years ago. Every time I touched it, I could almost hear her voice whispering somewhere, "Hold on to your roots, my daughter." I looked at myself in the mirror and smiled. Today, my daughter had been promoted to Vice President of Marketing at Broussard Sterling Holdings, the corporation in which I was the controlling shareholder. All I wanted was to go downstairs, sit at the dinner table, and watch my girl glow in what she believed was the peak moment of her life. I wanted to witness her happiness. Then Cameron's voice carried up from the bottom of the stairs. "Mom," I stepped into the hallway. "Yes, sweetheart?" Cameron climbed 3 steps, then stopped right in the middle of the staircase, neither coming up nor going down. As if that physical distance was necessary for her to say the things that were about to steal my breath. "Mom, don't come down," Cameron said. I froze. "What did you say?" She lowered her eyes and took a deep breath. And when Cameron lifted her gaze to look at me again, those eyes were ice cold. Not like my daughter's eyes, not like the eyes of the child I had held in my arms 32 years ago. "You embarrass me." The air in my lungs felt as if it had been sucked out. "Cameron, what are you talking about?" "This dinner," she continued, her voice flat, cold, as if reading from a script she'd rehearsed. "Mother Sterling will sit in the main seat instead of you. She knows how to behave at formal events like this. She's far more refined than you." I didn't scream. I didn't burst into tears. I only looked at my daughter, and I smiled, because in that exact moment something inside me shattered. But in that exact moment, something else, my will, snapped tight, like a lock finally finding its key. "All right then," I said, my voice so calm that even I found it strange. "I hope you enjoy your dinner." I closed the bedroom door, sat down on the edge of the 4-poster bed, placed my hand on the silver brooch, and I waited. From downstairs, sounds drifted up faintly, like the noise of a life I was being pushed out of. Loud conversation, the sharp clink of glasses, the overly boisterous voice of my son-in-law, Sterling Vaughn, mixed with his sharp, contemptuous laugh. And threaded through it all was the low, authoritative voice of Maribel Vaughn, Cameron's mother-in-law, who was now sitting in my seat, at my table, in my house. 30 minutes later, I stood up. I brushed my hair, put on my pearl earrings, checked my makeup again, as if I were preparing to walk into a battle I had avoided for far too long. Then I walked down the stairs. When I entered the dining room, everyone turned to look. Cameron went pale. Sterling's smile vanished as if someone had slapped it off his face. Maribel frowned, her irritation plain in her eyes. But I was not alone. Walking beside me, in a flawless suit and wearing a polite smile, was Mr. Caleb Rennie, the Chief Executive Officer of Broussard Sterling Holdings, the $8 billion multinational corporation my daughter had just been promoted within. Caleb stepped forward and extended his hand toward Cameron. "Cameron," he said, his tone as formal as if he were standing in the middle of a board meeting. "I would like to officially introduce you to Mrs. Yvette Broussard. She is the controlling shareholder of Broussard Sterling Holdings, and your promotion was personally approved by her." The silence afterward was so deep you could hear wine glasses trembling. Cameron didn't move. Sterling stiffened. Maribel looked frozen in place. As for me, I said something simple, light as a polite social greeting, but enough to drop the temperature in the room by several degrees. "Enjoy your dinner." Then I turned my back and walked up the stairs to my room. I did not come downstairs again that night, but everything changed from that night on. My name is Yvette Broussard. I am 57 years old this year, and before I tell you what happened after that night, you need to understand how I arrived at this moment. No mother reaches a night like that just because of bad luck or coincidence. If you have ever been made to feel unnecessary in the life of the person you love most, then you will understand what I felt in that moment. In the next part, I will tell you from the roots of New Orleans, from my mother's silver brooch, from the first factory, from the years when I built everything with my own hands, until I realized some children do not need your love, they only need your power and your money. And you will see how I prepared for that letting go. I was born in Treme, New Orleans, into a family that ran a small garment workshop. We weren't rich, but we were never lacking. I grew up among things that were very real. The slightly sharp scent of freshly cut fabric, the rumble of sewing machines before dawn, and my father's hands stained with ink as he went over invoices every night. My mother was a quiet, elegant woman. She always pinned a silver brooch at the collar of her blouse, like a refined period at the end of her entire life. Once she looked straight at me and said slowly, "Yvette, a woman who knows when to stay silent also knows when to speak." I admired my mother for that. But there was one thing she never taught me, or maybe she thought I would understand on my own. It was this: don't stay silent for too long. Don't stay silent until your voice gets buried under endurance. I studied business administration at Tulane University and graduated with honors. That was where I met Marcus Broussard, an engineering student, serious, responsible, and from an old wealthy family in uptown New Orleans. We married after 2 years, a simple wedding, white flowers, a string quartet, and handholds full of hope. That day, my mother gave me the silver brooch. "So you remember where you came from, Yvette." Marcus took a job at a textile company, and I decided to stay home when Cameron was born. It was the most natural decision in the world. My daughter, my entire universe. I still remember Cameron's big, round eyes looking at me as if I were the only light she had. Mornings in the kitchen, the scent of hazelnut coffee drifting through the air. Cameron sat in her high chair, both hands messy with blueberry pancake batter. I made breakfast while softly humming lullabies. Marcus sat reading the Wall Street Journal, always so serious, yet smiling every time Cameron called out loudly, "Mom!" Those were good years, so peaceful that I once believed my life would simply keep flowing that way. We lived in a modest townhouse in the Garden District suburbs, no showiness, a small backyard where Cameron ran around with a puppy, a front porch with pots of hydrangeas I watered every afternoon, and the living room held inherited furniture from Marcus's family. Old, but elegant, as people like to say. When Cameron was 5, my father was diagnosed with lung cancer. I moved back to New Orleans to care for him. Marcus stayed behind with Cameron. My mother couldn't manage the workshop alone. And I couldn't be a daughter, a mother, and the one carrying the workshop on my father's behalf all at once. One afternoon, my father held my hand tightly. His hand was thin, but the grip was still firm, like a final instruction. "Yvette, this workshop is yours. Don't sell it. You have vision. You have strength. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't do it." He died 3 weeks later. I inherited the sewing workshop. Marcus objected fiercely. "You don't have experience, Yvette. Sell it. Use the money for Cameron's education." But something deep inside me refused, not out of stubbornness, but because in my father's words, in my mother's eyes, in that silver brooch, I heard a responsibility being entrusted to me. I hired a manager, but I checked the books every week. I went to New Orleans twice a month. I learned how to read balance sheets, learned how to negotiate with suppliers, and learned how to recognize a lie almost instantly, the kind people hide behind polite smiles. The workshop grew. In just 5 years, we doubled production, opened 2 more facilities, hired 50 new employees. Then we started exporting to the East Coast. Marcus still didn't agree. "You're neglecting the family, Yvette." But Cameron never complained. I came home exhausted, but I still made time for her, helped her with homework, took her to the movies on Sundays, sat and listened to her talk about little dreams that, to me, were as big as the sky. "Mom," Cameron once said, "when I grow up, I want to be like you." Those words filled my heart until it felt like it might burst. Then, when Cameron was 12, Marcus died in a car accident. A truck ran a red light. They told me he didn't suffer. Everything happened instantly. There were only 2 of us left, Cameron and me. I cried for months, but I didn't allow myself to collapse. I had my child, I had the company, I had responsibilities, and I kept going. But I also knew I hadn't cried the right way. I didn't cry in front of Cameron. I thought that was strength. I thought it was protecting her. Every night after Cameron fell asleep, I would slip into the bathroom, turn the faucet on full blast, as if the water could cover everything. Then I sank onto the cold tile floor, crying until my chest ached, crying until there were no tears left. After that, I washed my face, dried it, walked back into the living room as if nothing had happened. The next morning, I still cooked breakfast, drove Cameron to school, went to work, smiled at colleagues, signed contracts, made decisions. No one knew I was dying slowly on the inside. Not even Cameron, my 12-year-old daughter, knew. And maybe that was my first mistake. I taught my daughter that. A strong woman doesn't cry. A strong woman doesn't show weakness. A strong woman carries everything alone, and Cameron learned that lesson too well. Years later, when she abandoned me, I asked myself, did I teach her that emotions are weakness? Did I teach her that love is a burden? Cameron attended the best private schools. She lacked nothing. French classes, summer trips to Europe, a new laptop every year. Everything she wanted, I tried to give her. I worked 12 hours a day. But every night, no matter what happened, we still ate dinner together. That was the rule for the 2 of us. "How was your day, sweetheart?" "Good, Mom. How was yours?" "Tiring, but seeing your face makes me happy." Cameron would smile. When she turned 18, I said, "Cameron, everything I've built is for you. One day, all of it will be yours." She hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Mom. I won't disappoint you." And do you know what the most ironic thing is? Back then, I truly believed Cameron would never hurt me. I thought, after everything we had been through, we would always be a team. I had no idea. There is a kind of change that happens very slowly, very quietly. But by the time you realize it, it has already gone too far. And the person who pushed my girl farther and farther away was the one who entered her life with a perfect smile. Cameron enrolled in a prestigious university, studying business administration like I did. She made friends, dated, lived a life I called normal. I was immensely proud. Until Cameron met Sterling. He was handsome, charming, with a perfect smile. The son of a distinguished family in River Oaks, Houston. His father was a famous lawyer, and his mother, Maribel, was the kind of woman who hosted major charity galas, the kind where, the moment she enters a room, people automatically lower their voices. At first, everything seemed fine. Sterling came for Friday dinner. I cooked my signature lasagna or tenderloin. Cameron laughed more. She seemed happy, but there was something in Sterling's eyes, and later in Maribel's eyes, that always unsettled me. A very concealed coldness, a way of looking me up and down, as if they were pricing me, not looking at a mother. One afternoon, I accidentally overheard Cameron's conversation. She was on the phone in the backyard. I was watering the garden. "Yes, Mom," Cameron said, her voice sweet and coaxing. "I know. But Sterling has a solid future." Then she added one sentence that made my blood turn cold. "And his mother has the right connections. That's what matters." I stood still, my hand still holding the hose, but my mind went ice cold. I said nothing. because I still had hope. I still believed my daughter would see the truth. But there is one thing I haven't told you. During the time Cameron was dating Sterling, I began to notice she was changing, not in an obvious, explosive way, but in tiny changes, details a mother notices immediately. Her tone when she talked about me to her friends. Before, Cameron used to say, "My mom built a company from zero with her own hands." Now she said, "Yeah, my mom has a small sewing shop." A small sewing shop. As if Broussard Sterling Holdings, the thing I had poured my entire youth into building, was just some workshop tucked along the roadside. The way she dressed also changed. Before, she was simple, a white button-down shirt, jeans, sneakers. Now it was designer labels from head to toe. Gucci, Prada, Louis Vuitton. I asked, "Where did you buy those?" Cameron answered as naturally as could be. "Mother Sterling took me shopping, Mom. She said I need to learn how to dress appropriately." Appropriate for what? I wondered. Appropriate for whom? But I didn't say it. Then one day, I saw Cameron post a photo on Instagram. It was taken at an upscale restaurant in downtown Houston. Cameron sat between Sterling and Maribel. All three wore dark, tasteful outfits. Maribel had her arm around Cameron's shoulder, smiling brightly. Caption: "Dinner with my favorites." I stared at that word, favorites. I scrolled down to the comments. Cameron's friends wrote, "Your future MIL is so chic." Cameron replied, "I know, right? She's teaching me everything. She's teaching me everything." I turned off my phone screen, sat motionless in the darkness of the living room. And I wondered, was there anything left that my daughter still needed me to teach her? Or what Cameron was learning now was how to step away from me without ever believing she was wrong. They got married 2 years later. A truly grand wedding. 300 guests, imported flowers, a live band, shimmering lights draped over everything like a luxurious dream. And I paid for all of it. Cameron insisted that Maribel be the one to organize the entire event, and I did only one thing: signed the checks. On the wedding day, Cameron hugged me tight, her voice soft, like when she was little. "Thank you for everything, Mom. You're the best." I stroked her hair, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. "All you need is to be happy, sweetheart." But that night, when I saw Maribel sitting in the seat of honor beside the bride and groom, while I was placed at table number 3, pushed all the way to the back, something inside me began to crack. I sat there in a lavender silk dress I had bought from a small boutique in the French Quarter. My mother's silver brooch was pinned right over my chest, like a reminder that I was still me, even if someone wanted to turn me into no one. I watched Cameron laugh and talk with Maribel. I watched the way Maribel touched my daughter's cheek, the intimate touch of a mother for her own child. I looked at Sterling from a distance. He looked at me with a cold, detached stare, like he was looking at an uninvited guest, and I suddenly understood something terrifying. On my own daughter's wedding day, I felt like an outsider. Beside me sat Rita, my friend from the days when I ran the workshop in Treme. She leaned closer and whispered, "Yvette, why did they seat you here?" I tried to keep my voice steady, as if none of this mattered. Maybe they needed space for more important guests. Rita looked at me, her eyes full of both pity and anger, like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You're the mother of the bride. You're the most important one." I didn't answer. I only took a sip of champagne. It tasted bitter, in a strange way. Then came the speeches. The MC held the microphone, voice excited. "And now we'll hear a few words from the bride's mother-in-law, Mrs. Maribel Vaughn." Maribel stood, elegant in a champagne-colored Oscar de la Renta gown. She walked up to the stage, took the mic, and smiled brightly as if the entire room belonged to her. "I want to tell Cameron that," Maribel began, her voice flowing like music. "From the very first time I met you, I knew you were the right match for Sterling. You're intelligent, ambitious, and you know how to bring out the best for yourself." The whole room erupted in applause. "Welcome to our family," Maribel continued. "I promise I will teach you everything you need to know to become a true River Oaks woman." Laughter, applause, admiring looks. Cameron stood up and hugged Maribel tightly. The two women stood under the stage lights, embracing in front of 300 guests like a perfect mother-daughter moment. And no one, not a single person, said my name. No one invited me to speak. No one asked whether the bride's biological mother wanted to say anything. I sat there, gripping my silk napkin so hard my fingers went numb. Rita placed her hand over mine and gave a small squeeze, as if trying to pull me back from the feeling of being abandoned in the middle of a crowd. "Yvette, do you want to go home?" I swallowed a deep breath. "No," I whispered. "I have to be here. For my daughter." But deep down, I already knew a cold truth. Cameron didn't need me here. She only needed my checks. Do you know what moment hurts the most? It's not when you're pushed out of the seat of honor. It's when you realize they did it naturally, as if you never belonged in that seat in the first place. And what's even more frightening is when you start wondering whether you're overreacting. I wondered that too, until the next things happened, so clear that I could no longer lie to myself even one more time. In the first few months after the wedding, everything became strange. Cameron and Sterling moved into a luxury apartment in River Oaks, huge windows looking out over the entire city, a balcony facing the Houston skyline like something out of a brochure. I helped them with the down payment. Cameron chose designer furniture. I asked only one gentle question. "Are you sure this is what you both want?" Cameron kissed my forehead and smiled. "Sterling has great taste, Mom." I didn't say anything more. At first, they still came for Sunday dinner like before. I cooked the comfort foods Cameron had loved since childhood: roast beef, mashed potatoes, apple pie, recipes where, just from the smell alone, I could remember her entire childhood. But Sterling barely touched his plate. "Sorry, Mrs. Broussard," he said, smiling politely, but with eyes as cold as ice. "I'm on a strict low-carb diet. You understand, right?" He smiled, but his eyes didn't. Maribel sometimes came along too. She sat at the head of the table, the seat Marcus used to sit in, the seat my father used to sit in when he visited. I said nothing. I reminded myself to keep the peace. Then one afternoon, Cameron called. "Mom, I need your help with something." "Tell me, sweetheart. Can you lend me $50,000 to cover investment costs?" $50,000. Not a small amount, but not something I couldn't give. "Did something happen?" "No, Mom, it's just, I need money." I transferred the money that same day. Cameron never mentioned it again. 2 weeks later, I was scrolling Instagram and saw the photos. Cameron and Sterling in Miami, a luxury resort, cocktails by the pool, a sunset so perfect it looked arranged. Caption: "Early anniversary celebration with my hubby." Something strange tightened in my chest, but I said nothing, because that was their money now, wasn't it? The Sundays started becoming less frequent. "Mom, we can't come this Sunday. Sterling has an event with his family." "Mom, this weekend we're going to the Hamptons with Sterling's family." "Mom, we're so tired. Is it okay if we just stay home and rest?" I was never upset. I always said, "Of course, sweetheart. Get some rest." But my house began to feel bigger and emptier. One day, I decided to show up unexpectedly. I stopped by their River Oaks apartment, bringing a box of homemade mac and cheese. I knew Cameron liked it. I wanted to make her happy, even if only through something small. I rang the bell. Sterling opened the door. He wore a silk robe, hair perfectly styled, as if even at home he was still maintaining an image. "Mrs. Broussard." "Hi, Sterling. I brought mac and cheese. I thought Cameron would like it." "Cameron isn't home." "Oh, where did she go? Why didn't she tell me?" "She went to work," Sterling said, as casually as if he were talking about the weather. Then he added, as if it were obvious, "You didn't know? Cameron just got hired at Broussard Sterling Holdings. She's been working there for 3 weeks already." I went still. Broussard Sterling Holdings, my company, the thing I built with my whole youth, the company that bears my name, and my daughter had been working there for 3 weeks, and I had no idea. I heard my voice go dry. "No, she didn't tell me." Sterling smiled, the cold smile I had started to recognize. "Oh, really? Cameron wants to be independent, you know. Do it herself, without Mom's help." The word Mom, in his mouth, sounded like a jab. I forced myself to stay calm. "I understand. Can I come in?" Sterling remained polite, but his refusal was sharp as a blade. "Thank you, but there's no need. Just give me the mac and cheese." Then he closed the door. I stood in the hallway holding the food container, feeling as if something inside me had just broken, something small, but painful enough to sting. Cameron was working at my company, and she hadn't told me. That night, I called Cameron. "Cameron, why didn't you tell me you're working at Broussard Sterling Holdings?" A beat of silence, then her voice came, quieter than usual. "Mom, I was going to, but what, sweetheart? I didn't want you to think I was taking advantage of you." "Baby, I would never think that." "I know, but Sterling said I have to build my own path. If you help me, people will think I'm useless." I heard every word clearly. "Sterling said," Cameron answered, repeating it like something that had been programmed. "Sterling said." I closed my eyes. "Cameron, you have enormous value. You always have." "Thank you, Mom. But please, understand me. I need to prove to everyone that I can do it on my own." "All right, sweetheart." I hung up. That night I cried, because my daughter was working at the company I built for her, and I didn't even get to know. There's something I want to tell you. Sometimes we trust the wrong person too much. Have you ever been disappointed by someone you love? In the weeks that followed, Cameron began rising through the company, fast, too fast. Caleb Rennie, my CEO, called. "Mrs. Broussard, your daughter is very capable, very hardworking." "I'm glad to hear that. We're planning to promote her to logistics director. She has potential." I knew Caleb was loyal. He would do anything I asked. But I also knew if I intervened directly, Cameron would be furious, and Sterling would be even more furious. So I let everything happen naturally. But there was still one thing that kept me awake at night. One afternoon, I went to Broussard Sterling Holdings. I didn't enter through the front. I went through the back entrance, took the service elevator, and went up to the logistics floor. I saw Cameron sitting in a cubicle, serious, focused, flipping through paperwork, talking on the phone. She looked happy. I was about to leave quietly when I heard a voice from the meeting room, and I recognized it immediately. Sterling's voice. "You need to tell your mother to put you in a better position. You can't stay in logistics forever. That's a place for ordinary employees." "Sterling, I've only been at the company for 2 months. Doesn't matter. Your mother is the owner. If you ask, she'll give it to you. Or does she not love you enough?" Silence. Then Cameron said softly, "My mother loves me." "Then don't be naive, Cameron. She has millions of dollars. Why not take advantage of it? My mother says you should be management, not wasting time with boxes and shipping." "I'm not wasting time." Sterling let out a scoffing laugh, voice sharp as shears. "Do you know how much an executive director makes? $300,000 a month. And how much are you making? $30,000. Ridiculous." I stood there frozen. So this was what was behind everything. Not love, not support, but ambition. I turned away silently, leaving that floor like a shadow. That evening, I sat alone, touched the silver brooch I always wore, and remembered my mother's words. A woman who knows when to stay silent also knows when to speak. Not time to speak yet, but I could feel it clearly. That moment was coming closer. I chose silence. Not because I was timid, but because I still had hope. I kept believing Cameron would wake up, would see what I saw, would remember who she was before Sterling entered and changed everything. But hope, sometimes, is what blinds people for the longest time. In the months that followed, my life felt like walking barefoot over shattered glass. Every step burned, but I kept walking, because I kept telling myself, just a little longer, surely she'll come back. Cameron continued to rise through the company. Department head, then regional coordinator, then executive assistant director. Every time there was a promotion, Caleb Rennie called me. "Mrs. Broussard, do you approve of promoting Cameron?" I always asked bluntly, as if to anchor myself to reason. "Does she deserve it?" "She's doing good work," Caleb replied, "but there are others with more experience." "Then give the position to them." Caleb went quiet for a beat, then spoke honestly, still polite but heavy. "Ma'am, your daughter comes to my office every week. She insists she's ready for more responsibility." I closed my eyes, and I answered the sentence I would later regret. "Give her the position, Caleb, but make her feel like she earned it herself." Understood. 2 years passed like that. Cameron grew inside the machine of the company like a tree watered by a source that never ran dry. Every promotion came with a raise. Along with it came luxury cars, expensive watches, dinners in places I had never set foot, though my money, in one way or another, was what sustained that lifestyle. And me, I was still the mother sitting and waiting for Sunday visits. But Sunday stopped coming. One afternoon, Cameron called, "Mom, Sterling and I are thinking about buying a house." "Buying a house?" "In River Oaks. It's beautiful. 4 bedrooms, a yard, a pool. Perfect." Then she hesitated, but the next sentence came smoothly, like something obvious. "We need you to help with the down payment." "How much?" $2 million. $2 million nearly caught in my throat. "Cameron, that's a very large amount." "I know, but real estate is a good investment. Besides, we'll pay you back, I promise." That word, promise, made something turn cold inside me. I tried to keep my voice gentle. "You don't need to pay me back, but are you sure you and Sterling can maintain a house like that?" "Of course. I'm earning a good salary, and Sterling is about to start an investment consulting firm." I paused. "Sterling? Is he working?" "Yeah. Not officially yet, but soon." Silence poured in between us. Then Cameron asked directly, "Mom, you'll help us, right?" That didn't sound like a request. It sounded like an assumption, as if it were my job. And I still answered, like always, "Of course, sweetheart." I transferred the money that week. They never mentioned it again, not once. 6 months later, I saw photos on social media. The new house, large, modern, designer interiors, abstract paintings, a kitchen glossy like a page from Architectural Digest. Cameron posted almost every day. My perfect home. Grateful for this blessing. Living the dream. No tag of me, no thanks, no invitation for me to come see the house. One Sunday, I gathered all my courage and called, "Cameron, I'd really love to see your new home." "Oh yes, Mom. Of course. We'll arrange it one day." One day never came. And if you're thinking, why didn't Yvette stop? Why did she keep signing checks? I understand. I asked myself that too in the quietest nights. But there's a truth only mothers understand. Sometimes the greatest fear isn't losing money. It's losing your child. And when you're afraid of losing your child, you convince yourself, just this one more time. The problem is that one more time is never the last time. One night, after a call with Cameron, I sat in the living room, in the armchair where I used to read stories to her. I looked at the photos on the wall, Cameron at 5 holding a puppy, at 12 on graduation day, at 18 when she entered college, and then on her wedding day smiling beside Sterling. Each photo was a memory, and each memory felt like a goodbye. I stood up and poured a glass of whiskey. I don't usually drink, but that night I needed my throat to burn, so my heart would feel less cold. I took a sip, sharp and scorching, and I wondered, how does a mother know when to let go? When does love turn into self-destruction? When do you have to say, enough? I didn't have the answer, so I kept waiting, kept hoping, kept staying silent. Gradually, I only saw Cameron at corporate events, shareholder meetings, company parties, annual reports. She always arrived with Sterling, perfect, smiling, and distant. She kissed my cheek. "Mom." "My love, are you okay?" "I'm fine, Mom. So busy, you know." Then she left, as if our meeting was only a formality. Sterling sometimes came near, polite enough that you couldn't fault him. But every word had thorns. "Mrs. Broussard, your dress is so beautiful." "Where did you buy it?" "A small shop in the French Quarter." "Oh, how lovely. Very vintage." His tone said the opposite of his words. Maribel also appeared, always elegant, always looking at me like an intruder. One New Year's gala, she sat beside me. "Yvette, Cameron is thriving. You must be proud." "I'm very proud." Sterling and I always tell her to take full advantage of this opportunity. Not everyone has a mother as generous as you. Generous. The word hung in the air like a gift-wrapped slap. Then Maribel said very softly, very sweetly, "Sometimes you have to know when to let go. Let them fly. You understand me, don't you?" I looked straight into her eyes. "I understand completely, Maribel." That night at home, I sat again in that armchair, touched the silver brooch, and cried. I cried because Cameron was drifting away, because Sundays had vanished, because I was no longer a priority. And worst of all, I realized I was allowing it to happen because I was afraid. Afraid that if I said one wrong thing, Cameron would cut me off forever. So I stayed silent again. I kept signing checks. I kept smiling in photos. I kept pretending everything was fine. But inside, I was dying slowly. Then one day Cameron called, "Mom, I need you to sign some paperwork." "What paperwork, sweetheart?" "For a new company project. I need your approval." "What is it about?" "It's technical. Caleb already reviewed it. I just need your signature." I trusted her. I signed. 2 weeks later, Caleb called, voice tense. "Mrs. Broussard, did you approve purchasing 3 luxury SUVs for Cameron's department?" "3 SUVs? Total cost, $250,000. I froze. "Ma'am," Caleb slowed down, "the document you signed also approved a performance bonus for Cameron worth $50,000. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "Caleb, did Cameron ask you to prepare those documents?" Silence. Then Caleb answered quietly, "Yes, she said you had already agreed." I hung up. And that night, something in me changed. It was no longer sadness or fear. It was clarity, cold, painful enough that you have to clench your teeth to endure it. Cameron was using me, and I was allowing her to do it. Do you know what the worst feeling is? It's not being betrayed by a stranger. It's when the person you gave birth to, the person you raised, the person you love more than your own life, looks at you like an ATM. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay staring at the ceiling, and everything replayed like a film reel. The times she needed money urgently, the promises to pay it back, the forgotten calls, the happy photos with Maribel, without me. And I was forced to face what I had avoided for far too long. Cameron didn't love me because I was her mother. She loved what I could give. That feeling was like being stabbed in the heart. But that knife was in the hands of the very person I had brought into the world. After the call with Caleb, something woke up inside me. Not anger, and certainly not a desire for revenge. It was clarity. The kind of clarity that makes it hard to breathe because it forces you to look straight at the truth. That you have been blind for too long, that you have been rationalizing the unjustifiable, only because you were afraid of loneliness, afraid of losing your child, afraid to admit that your love was being calculated and priced. For many days, I didn't call Cameron. I waited. I waited for her to call first. Just one sentence, "How are you, Mom?" would have been enough. One message, "What did you eat today?" would have been enough. Anything that showed I was still her mother, rather than a name on a list of contact when money is needed. 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, nothing. In the end, I had to be the one to dial. "Cameron, I need to talk to you." Her voice was dry and rushed. "Mom, I'm busy. Can we do it later?" "It's very important." She sighed, the sigh of someone being bothered. "Fine. What is it, Mom?" I took a deep breath. "The documents you had me sign last month. Caleb said they approved the purchase of 3 SUVs and a bonus for you." A very long silence. Then Cameron replied calmly, as if it were obvious. "And that's right, Mom. The SUVs are for the project. We need them. And the $50,000 bonus? It's part of compensation. I work hard, Mom. I deserve it." "Cameron, I've never doubted you work hard, but you lied to me." "I didn't lie." I had barely opened my mouth when she cut me off, impatient. "Mom, I don't have time for this. If you have issues in the company, talk to Caleb." "Cameron, I have to go. See you." She hung up. I stood still, the phone still pressed to my ear, my hand trembling as if I had just slipped off the edge of a cliff. And that night, I made a decision. If she wouldn't tell the truth, I would find it myself. The next day, I went to Broussard Sterling Holdings. No notice. No call. I simply showed up. Caleb greeted me in his private office. "Mrs. Broussard, what a surprise." "Caleb, I need you to be honest with me," I said bluntly. "How is Cameron really doing at work?" Caleb lowered his eyes. I clenched my hands. "Please tell me the truth." He sighed, then said, "Cameron is smart. She has potential, but she isn't at the level required for her current responsibilities." "What do you mean?" "She's often late. She delegates too much. She makes decisions without consultation, and when she's wrong, she blames other people." I stayed silent. Caleb continued, his voice heavier. "Some employees have filed complaints. They say Cameron is favored, that she got that position because she's your daughter." I looked him straight in the eye. "And is that true?" Caleb met my gaze without looking away. "You know the answer, ma'am." "Yes, I did. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because you once asked me to treat her like any other employee. I tried, but every time I set a boundary, Cameron said she would speak to you, that you would be on her side." "I never said that." "I know," Caleb replied softly, "but she uses it as a shield." I stood up. "Thank you, Caleb, for your honesty." He asked, worried, "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet." And that was the truth. I left his office with a broken heart, but with eyes that had finally opened for the first time in many years. Retention beat. At this point, I want you to ask yourself one question. If the person you love most in the world starts treating you like a source of money, what would you do? Face it head on, or keep pretending you don't see it, just to hold on to a fragment of a family that is already cracking? Because from that moment on, what I discovered afterward was no longer a feeling. It was evidence. That afternoon, I did something I had never done before. I checked Sterling and Cameron's social media. Not just the photos, but the comments, the tags, the interactions. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. Under a photo of the new house, a friend asked, "OMG, what a beautiful home. How did you guys swing this?" Cameron replied, "Haha, thanks. You know, Sterling has his connections and his mom, well, she always loosens the purse strings." I read it again and again. She always loosens the purse strings, as if I were a wallet, as if my love had a price. I kept scrolling, trips, expensive restaurants, designer goods, jewelry. And in the comments, the story was always the same. Sterling spoils me. My husband knows how to treat me right. Blessed with this man. But never, never did she mention me. Not the down payment for the house, not the money for the cars, not that I built the company where she was working, as if I didn't exist. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, gripping my silver brooch until my fingertips hurt, and I heard my mother's words echo back. Yvette, when someone erases you from their story, it's because they know that without you, there wouldn't be any story at all. The next day, I did the most painful thing. I went to Cameron and Sterling's house without warning. Sterling opened the door, designer sweatpants, hair neat like an advertisement, a cup of coffee in his hand. Mrs. Broussard. Hello, Sterling. Is Cameron home? No, she's already gone to work. Can I come in? He hesitated for a beat, then nodded. Of course. The moment I stepped inside, I felt like I was standing in a museum of extravagance. High ceilings, cold, glossy marble floors, expensive furniture, large canvases on the walls, a declaration that they had leveled up, and most of that level had been paid for with my money. Sterling asked, "Would you like coffee?" "No, thank you." I looked him straight in the eye. "Sterling, I want to talk." "About what?" "About Cameron, about us, about all of this." He gave a cold smile. "I don't understand." "You do." The smile vanished. Sterling's voice tightened. "If you came to complain—" "I didn't come to complain. I came to understand. Why Cameron doesn't contact me anymore, why she doesn't come visit me, why I feel like I'm no longer important." Sterling set his cup down on the table with a dry clack. "Ma'am, Cameron is an adult. She has her own life, her own family." "I know. And sometimes mothers need to know how to let go." That word again, let go. "Sterling, I have never tried to control Cameron." "Then what do you want?" "I want respect. I want Cameron not to lie to me. I want her not to use me." Sterling shot to his feet. "No one is using anyone. Cameron works hard. She deserves everything she has." "I never said otherwise." "But you imply it," he snapped, "as if Cameron has no ability without you." "That's not true." "Then stop hanging over her. Stop controlling her." I stayed silent. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I understood. To Sterling, I would always be an obstacle, an inconvenient mother-in-law, a meddling mother, a woman standing in the way of his ambition. I stood up and adjusted my bag. "Thank you for your time." "Mrs. Broussard." "I understand," I said softly, but firmly. I left that house with hot tears in my eyes, but also with something else. Certainty that I could not continue like this. I could not beg for a place in my daughter's life, and I could not pay for love anymore. That night I called Caleb. "Caleb, I need you to help me with something." "Yes, ma'am." "I want you to arrange a dinner at my house to celebrate Cameron's upcoming promotion." "A promotion?" "Yes, we're going to promote her to executive director." Caleb was silent for a long time. "Ma'am, are you sure?" "I'm completely sure." "And who will attend?" "Cameron, Sterling, his mother, Maribel, and you. Only 5 people." Caleb hesitated. "Ma'am, what are you planning?" I smiled, calm in a way that surprised even me. "Nothing bad, Caleb. Just a dinner." I hung up, and that night, when my fingers touched the silver brooch, I knew the moment had come, the moment to speak, to lay out the truth, and to let karma do its work. The week before that dinner was the longest week of my life. Not because I was worried, but because I had made my final decision. And when a 57-year-old woman has been silent for too long, her decision leaves no room for half measures. Decisive, cold, and without turning back. 3 days before the dinner, Cameron called. "Mom, Caleb said you're hosting a dinner to celebrate my promotion." "That's right." "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" I wanted it to be a surprise. "Oh, thank you, Mom. Will anyone else be there?" "Only the closest people. Sterling, your mother-in-law, and Caleb." "Mother Sterling?" Cameron's voice dropped. "Yes," I said evenly. "I think Maribel should be there too. After all, she's part of your life now." A pause. Then Cameron said softly, "Okay, Mom. I'll come on Friday." "Are you happy about the promotion?" "Of course, Mom. I've worked hard for this." "I know, sweetheart." I hung up and smiled because I knew what Cameron didn't, that dinner would change the direction of everything. In the days that followed, I prepared not only the dinner, but myself. I went to the salon for my hair and nails. I bought a new red dress, confident, elegant, with a tasteful slit, enough to tell the world I was no longer a woman bowing her head, begging to be loved. The person in the mirror was no longer the woman who had cried silently for months. She was a woman who had just reclaimed her dignity. Friday night arrived. I hired a catering service. White flowers, candles, crystal glasses, silver cutlery, everything perfect. And the dining table was set for 6. At 7 p.m., they arrived. Cameron came first with Sterling. She wore a fitted blue dress, high heels, flawless makeup, long glossy hair. "Mom," Cameron kissed my cheek. "My love, you look beautiful." "Thank you, Mom." Sterling stepped forward, polite in the way that is polite with calculation. "Mrs. Broussard, your home is lovely. It's been a long time since we came." I smiled. "Thank you. It's been a long time. Since I've been invited to your home, too." Sterling's smile froze for a beat. "Oh, we've just been so busy." "I understand." 10 minutes later, Maribel arrived. Designer light cream suit, pearls, logo bag. She walked in as if stepping onto a stage. "Yvette, it's good to see you." "You too, Maribel." Maribel looked around, then curved her lips. "Your house is charming, very cozy." I didn't evade. "Thank you. It's modest, but it's mine." We sat in the living room. I offered white wine. Cameron was tense, constantly glancing at the clock. "Caleb will come, right, Mom?" "Yes, soon." Sterling looked around with calculating eyes. "Mrs. Broussard, have you thought about renovating?" "No, I like it the way it is." Sterling shrugged. "I could suggest a few ideas, with my investment consulting firm." I looked straight at him. "I didn't know you had a consulting firm, Sterling." "Oh, it hasn't officially launched, but I'm working on it." Maribel cut in immediately, her voice light but sharp. "Sterling has great potential. He just needs a little startup capital." She looked directly at me. I nodded. "I understand." The doorbell rang. I stood. "That must be Caleb." I opened the door. Caleb stood there, tailored suit, leather briefcase, professional smile. "Mrs. Broussard, thank you for coming." But Caleb didn't come alone. Beside him was Douglas Whitman, the corporate attorney for Broussard Sterling Holdings. Cameron didn't know him. I did. And I saw Cameron hesitate for exactly 1 beat, as if sensing this was not an ordinary dinner. We went to the dining table. I sat at the head. Cameron on my right. Sterling beside Cameron. Maribel across from Cameron. Caleb and Douglas at the remaining 2 ends. The courses came out in perfect timing. Cream of asparagus soup, arugula salad with raspberry dressing, filet mignon with au gratin potatoes, freshly toasted bread. Everything was perfect, except the atmosphere. Cameron tried to bridge the tension. "Mom, it's so good." "Thank you, sweetheart." "Did you cook this yourself?" "No, I hired a service. I wanted it to be special." Sterling cut in. "Very luxurious. I didn't know you liked this kind of thing." I took a sip of wine. "There are many things you don't know about me, Sterling." His smile thinned. Maribel gave a small laugh. "We're here to celebrate Cameron. You must be very proud, Yvette." "I'm always proud of my daughter." "And this promotion," Maribel said, will come with more responsibility. Cameron sipped her wine as if gathering courage. Caleb said the salary for this position is $350,000 a month. Sterling nearly choked. $350,000? That's generous. Maribel smiled broadly. Broussard Sterling Holdings knows how to value its employees. Then she dropped a line that sounded light as a feather, but weighed like stone. Especially when they're family. I set my fork down, the soft metallic sound small but unmistakable. Maribel, what do you mean? Maribel leaned back, voice friendly. Nothing bad. It's just reasonable that Cameron has a few advantages. She's your daughter. Naturally, you support her. Advantages? I repeated. Fast promotions, bonuses, opportunities. Cameron snapped back, tense. Mom, I earned it myself. I know you. No, Cameron cut in. You don't know because you were never there. You never saw how hard I work. Sterling touched Cameron's hand. Calm down. No, Sterling, I'm tired because everyone thinks I'm only here because my mom is the owner. Cameron turned to Caleb. Caleb, do you think that too? Caleb looked at me as if asking permission. I nodded. Caleb spoke slowly. Cameron, there are things you should know. Like what? Every promotion you've received was directly approved by your mother. Every raise, every bonus, every benefit. All of it required her authorization. That's not true. Cameron half stood. It is true, sweetheart, I said. The table went silent, as if the air had been pulled out. If you can imagine a dinner where every candle, every polite smile is only a cover over a bomb already planted, then you'll understand. When the truth is spoken, what explodes isn't noise, but years of denial and a mother's love turned into an investment. And in just a few minutes, you'll understand why I set the table for 6, when in reality, I was preparing for a farewell. I stood up. My hand touched the silver brooch like a lifetime reflex. Cameron, I need you to listen without interrupting. I told her. 32 years ago, I inherited a small textile workshop in Tremy, New Orleans. No one believed in me, but I didn't sell it. I worked 14 hours a day, learned from scratch, negotiated, fought, and little by little, the small workshop became Broussard Sterling Holdings. When Cameron's father died, she was only 12. There were only the two of us. I promised she would never lack anything, and I kept that promise. I paid for the best of everything, without ever asking for it back. I only wanted her to be happy. When you married Sterling, I said directly, I gave you $2 million to buy a house. You haven't paid it back, and you have never once said thank you. Cameron tried to argue. We did. When, Cameron? When? I asked, gentle but sharp. She choked on her words. When you came into the company, I continued, I asked Caleb to treat you like any employee, but every time he set a boundary, you threatened to talk to Mom. Cameron went pale. Every promotion, every raise, every bonus, every benefit went through my signature. Mom, I didn't know. Cameron's voice broke. You did know, I said, then looked at Sterling. And you knew too. That's why every time you needed money, Cameron asked me, because you knew I would always say yes. Sterling's throat tightened. I looked at Maribel. And you knew too. That's why you've always treated me like an inconvenience, because you understand that without me, there would be nothing to enjoy. Maribel's face flushed. I turned back to Cameron, my voice slow and aching. The most painful thing is that you pushed me away. You stopped calling, stopped coming, stopped checking on me. And I admitted, I had allowed it because I was afraid of losing her. But tonight, I said, touching the silver brooch, I remember my mother's words. A woman who knows when to stay silent also knows when to speak, and it is time for me to speak. I asked Cameron things that made her collapse. Did she call me on my birthday? No. Did she know I had gallbladder surgery? No. Did she know I sold the Chicago workshop? No. Why didn't you know? I asked. Because you never asked, Cameron cried. Mom, I'm sorry. I nodded. I know, but sorry isn't enough. I looked at Douglas. Mr. Whitman. Douglas opened his briefcase and took out a folder. The documents as requested by Mrs. Broussard. Cameron looked confused. What documents? Documents for Mrs. Broussard to resign her position as controlling shareholder of Broussard Sterling Holdings. Cameron sprang up. Mom, what are you doing? I looked at her, my voice steady. I'm letting you go, Cameron. Just like everyone keeps saying, mothers need to know when to let go. You can't, Cameron panicked. I can, and I will. Sterling stepped forward. Mrs. Broussard, please. No, Sterling, I've waited long enough. I said to Cameron, each word clear. Starting tomorrow, I will no longer be a part of Broussard Sterling Holdings. I'm selling my shares. Cameron looked like she caved in. Then, what about me? I answered, you will walk your own path, alone. Cameron sobbed. Mom, please. And for the first time in years, I could breathe, not because the pain was gone, but because I had finally reclaimed my voice, my dignity, and my strength. The silence after what I said was so deep, it felt as if the entire room had been pressed down to the bottom of the water. Cameron collapsed fully into her chair, both hands clutching her head as if the moment she let go, her whole world would shatter right in front of her eyes. Maribel turned pale, lips sealed tight. Sterling trembled, his eyes darting non-stop, as if searching for a way out. Caleb looked at me, not with fear, but with respect. And me. I felt light for the first time in many years. Light, as if I had finally set down a heavy suitcase I had been dragging my whole life. Mom, Cameron lifted her head, her voice rough. You can't throw everything away, just because of one moment of anger. I looked straight at her. This isn't one moment, Cameron. This is 2 years of humiliation, 2 years of silence, 2 years of feeling invisible. But do you know how many times I've cried? My voice cracked, not from weakness, but because the truth was finally being spoken out loud. How many times I prepared food and then sat there waiting for you to come. How many nights I stayed awake, asking myself what I did wrong. Cameron started crying, tears streaming down her cheeks. I gave you everything, Cameron, everything. And what did you do? You tossed me aside. Mom, I'm truly sorry. Cameron sobbed, trying to force the words out clearly. I'm truly sorry. I nodded slowly. I know, but forgiveness isn't enough. Cameron looked at me, desperate. Then what do you want? I answered, each word clear. I want you to understand what it feels like to lose everything, the way I lost you. Douglas cleared his throat lightly. His voice was calm, professional, cold. Mrs. Broussard, if you sign these documents tonight, the sale will take effect within 72 hours. I picked up the pen. Cameron reached her hand out as if trying to hold the air in place. Mom, wait. Please give me a chance. Let me prove I can change. I looked at her, my voice softening but not retreating. Cameron, I don't need you to change to please me. I need you to realize one thing. Cameron swallowed hard. Realize what? That money can't buy love. I said slowly, as if carving each sentence into the dining table. That success can't replace loyalty, and that a mother is not an ATM. Sterling burst into tears. His voice fell apart. Mrs. Broussard, please, we need you. I looked straight at him. Do you need me? Or do you need my money? Sterling went rigid. He couldn't answer. I nodded, as if I had expected it. That's the difference, Sterling. You never needed me. You only needed what I could give. Maribel stepped forward, her voice urgent, trying to regain control. Yvette, be reasonable. Think about your daughter. Think about her future. I turned to her, calm. I spent 32 years thinking about that girl's future. I emphasized it. Now I'm going to think about my future. Then I bent down and signed the first document, then the second, the third. Each signature felt like removing a shackle. Each stroke of the pen was a farewell. Not a farewell to my daughter, but a farewell to the illusion that everything would go back to the way it was, that if I endured just a little longer, she would finally understand on her own. When I finished signing, I handed the folder back to Douglas. It's done. Cameron slumped in her chair, as if all her strength had been drained. And now what, Mom? She choked out. What am I supposed to do now? I looked at her for a long time. What all of us have to do when we lose what matters, I said. Learn. Cameron sobbed. Learn what? Learn to value what you have before it disappears. I raised my hand to my chest and unclasped the silver brooch from my dress, the brooch my mother had given me, the brooch I had worn in every important moment of my life. I walked over to Cameron. Take it. Cameron froze. What is that? Your grandmother's brooch. My voice slowed. She gave it to me on the day I got married. She told me to wear it so I'd remember where I came from. I placed the brooch into her hand, then closed her fingers around it. I want you to keep it, I said, my voice not loud, but sharp as a blade. And every time you look at it, I want you to remember tonight. Remember that love cannot be bought, family cannot be abandoned, and that a mother will always be a mother, even if you choose to forget. Cameron clenched the brooch in her fist, and she cried like she hadn't cried in years. There are falls that don't begin with losing money. They begin the moment you realize what you thought was yours was actually built on someone else's love. And when that love is withdrawn, everything collapses like a house with no foundation. But the most painful part isn't the collapse. The most painful part is understanding. You pushed the most important person out of your life with your own hands a long time ago. 3 months after I signed the sale papers, my life was completely different. Not materially different, but different in its essence. I sold the townhouse. It was too big for one person, too many memories, too much darkness from the past. I bought a small condo in Queen Anne, Seattle. Large windows that welcomed light, a balcony with a few succulent pots, a kitchen where I cooked only for myself. It was perfect. I began doing the things I had put off for years. I joined an art class and discovered I loved oil painting, the vivid colors, the feeling of being free to create something simply for the joy of creating. I joined a book club, women my age with different life stories, but one thing in common, they had all been forgotten inside their own lives. We met every Tuesday, drank coffee, talked about books, and then talked about life. For the first time in many years, I had friends. In those 3 months, I didn't look for Cameron, and Cameron didn't look for me either. At first, it hurt terribly. Every day, I still unconsciously waited for a message, a call, a sign, but gradually, the pain turned into acceptance, and acceptance turned into peace. Caleb called occasionally to check on me. Mrs. Broussard, how are you? I'm well, Caleb. Truly, very well. I'm glad to hear that. How is the company? The new owner is changing many things, some good, some not. I paused for a beat. And Cameron? Silence on the other end. Something happened, Caleb? His voice dropped. Cameron doesn't work at Broussard Sterling Holdings anymore. I froze. What? The investors reviewed the entire file. They found irregularities. What kind of irregularities? Personal expenses billed to the company, unjustified bonuses, falsified performance reports. I felt my heart. as if it stopped beating. Did Cameron do that? Not directly, but she approved many of those expenses, and when the investors demanded explanations, she couldn't justify them. Did they fire her? They demanded her resignation. If not, they would sue. I closed my eyes. When did this happen? 2 weeks ago. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I thought you wouldn't want to know. I shook my head, though he couldn't see. I will always want to know. She's my daughter. I understand, ma'am. I'm sorry. How is she? Not very good. I swallowed hard. Sterling left her. It felt like a punch straight to my stomach. What? A week ago, he moved out. Filed for divorce. Why? Caleb hesitated, then said it plainly. From what I've heard, because Cameron doesn't have money anymore. Tears spilled down my cheeks, not triumphant tears, but painful tears. For my daughter. For the brutal lessons she was being forced to learn. But I didn't go to her, because if I went right now, Cameron would think I was there to rescue her, and that would not help her. She needed to hit bottom. She needed to understand the price of the choices she had made. 1 month later, I received a letter, handwritten, on slightly wrinkled paper. The handwriting shook, as if the writer had to stop many times to breathe. I opened it, my heart pounding. Mom, I don't know if you'll read this letter. I don't know if I still matter to you anymore, but I need to write it. 4 months have passed since that dinner, the hardest 4 months of my life. I lost my job. I lost my home. I lost Sterling. I lost everything I used to think defined me. And in all of that loss, I finally found you. Not by meeting you, but through memory. I remember the nights when I was little, when you read bedtime stories to me. I remember when I was 12 and Dad died, and you said, "We'll be okay. We're always okay." I remember my graduation day, when you cried because you were proud. I remember all the times you were there, without asking for anything in return. And I realized something that tore my soul apart. I forgot you. I forgot you when I got married. I forgot you when I started making money. I forgot you when Sterling convinced me you were an inconvenience. I forgot you at the exact moment you needed me most. And now, when I've lost everything, I finally understand who I lost first. You. I'm not writing to ask you to rescue me. I'm not writing to ask for money. I'm not writing to ask you to come back. I'm writing to say thank you. Thank you for loving me even when I didn't love you back. Thank you for giving me everything even when I didn't deserve it. Thank you for letting me go when I needed to fall, because you were right. Sometimes the only way to learn is by losing. And I needed to lose everything to understand what truly matters. Now I live in a small apartment in Capitol Hill. I work at a community computer repair shop. I earn little. I live simply. But for the first time in many years, I feel free. Free from appearances. Free from expectations. Free from lies. Every day I look at the brooch you gave me, and every day I remember your words. Love without respect is only exploitation. You were right. I exploited you. I used you. I hurt you. And there is no excuse for that. I only want you to know, I see it now. I understand. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to become the daughter you deserve to have, even if I'm no longer beside you. I love you, Mom. I have always loved you. Cameron. I finished the letter with tears running down my cheeks, and for the first time in months, I felt that my daughter had truly awakened. There are apologies that don't come with tears in front of you. They come when someone dares to look straight at the truth they once avoided. And sometimes, what changes a person isn't because they're afraid of losing you. It's because they finally understand how much they hurt you. Just a little more, and you'll see that atonement isn't coming back to beg for forgiveness. It's coming back as a better version of yourself. 2 weeks later, Cameron knocked on the door of my condo in Seattle. She wore old jeans, a simple shirt, worn-out shoes, but her eyes were brighter than I expected. No more cold, arrogant River Oaks pride, only truth. "Mom, my love." We hugged. In that hug was everything: forgiveness, pain, and love, the love that survived every cut. We sat on the balcony, drank coffee, watched the sunset fall over Seattle. "How's your work?" I asked. "Tiring, but honest," Cameron said. "I'm happy." "I'm glad to hear that." Cameron looked at me, asking softly, as if afraid of breaking the air. "And you? How are you, Mom?" I exhaled, very gently. "Free." Cameron smiled. "I'm happy for you." We sat quietly for a while. Then Cameron spoke, her voice low. "Mom, you were right about everything." I shook my head, gentle but honest. "Not everything, but right about what matters." Cameron swallowed. "Do you know what the hardest thing is when you lose everything?" "What?" "Realizing it was never yours," Cameron said, her eyes red. "That everything I had came from you, and I treated it as if I deserved it." I nodded. "Now you know." "Now I know." Cameron took my hand. "Thank you, Mom, for not saving me." I squeezed her hand back. "Thank you for learning the lesson." And in that moment, I understood. Karma had done its work, not through revenge, but through justice. Cameron lost material things, but she regained what was priceless: dignity, humility, and the chance to begin again, as a new woman, as my daughter. Finally, my name is Yvette Broussard. This year I am 58 years old, and this is my story, the story of a woman who lost everything to find herself again. The story of a mother who let her child go so that both could be free. The story of a woman who chose dignity above all else. And if someone asked me today, was it worth it? I would say, yes, 1,000 times yes. Because now I sleep well. Because now I live in freedom. Because now, finally, I am myself. If you've listened to the very end, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because every story on this channel is not just drama. It's a lesson about boundaries, dignity, and how a woman stands back up after being hurt by the person she loved most. And if you know a mother, a child, or anyone being treated like an obligation instead of a human being, share this story with them. Sometimes, just one story is enough to give someone the courage to say 2 words: enough.